Cool, guys. It looks like we are live. Was having a little bit of trouble with these new graphics I was making and stuff. Kind of messed up the camera, I guess, somehow. I don't know how the graphics I was doing on this end ended up messing up everything else, but it did. But alas, we are here for our weekly DFS live stream. Going to be giving you guys everything you guys need to know for this week's event, whether it's the weather, ownership, player pool, strategy, of course, any of your live questions. We're going to have you guys completely covered. I can see a couple of you guys already down there in chat. What is going on, Chandler? Same thing with dropping birdies. And if Luke was my paperboy when I was a kid, he would be always late then too. Yeah, man, I kind of have that island life type of attitude to things, get to them when I get to them, as long as they're done on time and as long as it doesn't affect anyone else, right? So was able to get in here. We're covering this for you guys now. And yeah, I'm glad you guys are in here and join the chat. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. First off, with a little bit of a weather review for this week. Let's go ahead and we're going to get better with these graphics over time. Don't worry. There's a couple of guys I have working on some overlays. This is going to start to look a lot more professional as the weeks go on here. But first and foremost, weather for Thursday. They're going to be teeing off right around 6 a.m. They need as much of the sunlight as possible for this week. You can see in the morning, it doesn't start off with all too much wind, 5 to 6 miles an hour isn't going to cause these players too much trouble. But right turned around 10, 11 a.m., it gets up to 10 miles an hour sustained winds. That means gusts of 25 to 30 miles an hour potentially, which is going to be problematic. And this is going to cause a little bit of a wave advantage because for the guys that are finishing up in the morning, they're going to be playing in some really rough conditions. And you can see as soon as the second wave starts going off, right around 12:30 to 1 p.m. over there on the West Coast, you can see it starts to die back down. Gets down to 7 miles an hour pretty quickly, and then down to 5 by 2. And they're going to finish out the day with extremely benign conditions. Now, if we go over here to Friday, you can see that it's pretty much benign the entire day. In the morning, you can see 3 miles an hour. So the guys that were playing in really solid conditions in the afternoon, getting that usual morning calm weather where you can go out there and attack a golf course. And in the afternoon, we can't see all of it. They're being a little bit stingy with their data there. But the whole way up until 4 p.m., which is an hour or two before play ends, it's at 6 miles an hour at a max, which means that pretty much all day Friday, these guys are going to be able to take aim at these pins, which means that the only real players that are going to have trouble are the guys in the morning tomorrow morning. So there is something to watch out for. You might want to try and target in some of your lineups, not all of your lineups, of course, maybe a 4-5-1 stack with that second wave, where you're taking guys in that PM wave, hoping that that morning weather tomorrow really does cause a lot of guys to miss a cut. It's not guaranteed to work, but over the years, from time to time, we do see this end up happening. Let's go ahead and go right into the player pool now, guys. Let's hop over here to the Patreon projections. And as we do always here, we're going to start off with a little bit of a key stat review. Obviously, I do have a full comprehensive breakdown of this golf course on the channel. This week, it was 48 minutes or something like that. I went a little bit bonkers with breaking this place down. But of course, let's do a little bit of a review. First and foremost, this is a ball striker's paradise. It's a difficult golf course, but the main difficulty here, first and foremost, tons of bunkering, tons of hazards around the green. Off the tee, while there are natural areas, outside of that, it's pretty much wide open, right? There's not many trees. The rough is extremely easy to hit out of. It's pretty much non-existent. I mean, they're in a desert. There's only so much they can do in terms of trying to make that lush. And like I said, the real defense of this golf course is into greens. Not only do you have those hazards, but you also have raised, extremely undulated green surfaces that also are raised, like I said. So not only are they really firm and fast, it's really hard to get a ball to stop on them. When you miss them, getting up and down is nearly impossible. It's one of the hardest golf courses to get up and down on, which is why we see some of the more well-rounded players have success here. Guys that aren't just good with the off-the-tee play and ball striking, that are also good at getting up and down. Putting might be the one stat that doesn't matter. I mean, we've seen Hideki win twice here, Brooks Koepka win twice here. So that's why you can see that shots gained putting makes its way at the bottom of the board here. Of course, stats like shots gained approach, shots gained off the tee at the top of the board, right? Nearly 55% of my modeling this week is just taking a look at ball striking alone. Of course, shots gained around the green, we talked about how that's going to be important this week. That makes its way there at number 3. And something to mention about the surfaces, and I'm typically a stickler for green surfaces, especially trying to target guys that are better on one surface versus their baseline. We're dealing with an extremely unique surface this week. It's a blend of Bermuda, POA, and bent grass, something that we see at 4 golf courses all year, but outside of that, nowhere else, right? So a lot of guys in this field have no sample size on it at all. So it's really hard to take any type of assertion there. So for shots gained putting, this is a much lower number than what we typically have in my modeling. It's typically a little bit closer to 20%. And no surface type, right? I just have it as pure shots gained putting. Birdie or better percentage is important because there is a lot of risk reward involved with this golf course. So making sure we take guys that are aggressive is important. We have very large greens, so making sure we have guys that don't 3-putt is important. An extra par 4, so par 4 scoring is a little bit more important this week. An eagle rate, because of that risk reward factor, much like up here with birdie or better percentage. That's a way to encapsulate that. And lastly, you can see this last category, just 1.5% weighting, so not much at all right there, is the putting on this crazy surface, which we do have at a few notable country clubs. Austin Country Club, where they played that match play, had it. They had it at the Concession. They have it at Innisbrook, which is where they have the Valspar. They have it at TPC Sawgrass, and I think TPC Summerlin. Don't quote me on that. I think there might be like 1 or 2 more. But either way, those are the golf courses that I went through the entire list. So I used those 1 or 2 extra ones more and compiled as much data as I could, right? For some guys, it's not going to make any difference at all, right? They're going to have no data for it. But for the ones that historically putted really well on it, like a Jordan Spieth, that's won at multiple of those venues. Like somebody like a Sam Burns, who's won at the Valspar and competed at multiple of those venues, really played well. It's going to make a little bit of a difference, right? Maybe it gives them that extra 0.2, 0.3%. Sorry, not percent, 0.1, 0.2 point projection boost that actually makes them more owned in my player pool. So that's what we're going to do for the key stats this week. And now let's go ahead and talk about the player pool. And before we do that, let's go ahead and talk about the chat. John Berry says, have to give you shit. I was waiting for it. I deserve it. Barry says, about to drop a bomb. Let's go. Okay. Jason R says, let's go. Waste DFS money, no management. I have no idea what waste DFS. I guess that's a play on the name of the golf tournament. I like the DFS of this golf tournament. It's really predictable. It tends to be pretty nice to us here. Then Justin says, what's up, Luke? What is going on, Justin? I'll remind you guys, we're going to be going through the player pool. This is going to be by far the longest segment of the video. If there's at any point somebody you want me to do a deeper dive on, or you have any questions at all, whether it's for fantasy, outright bets, if you guys are playing over there in FanDuel, you can take a gander at that board as well. Do not be shy at all to ask any questions. And Ali Burrow says, let's go. Let's absolutely get it this week, guys. This is one of my favorite golf tournaments of the year. In terms of non-majors, it's number 2. Players Championship has a special place in my heart. It's the first golf tournament I ever went to. I go there every single year. I'm going there in a few weeks. And something to note before we get into this, because I'll forget, I'm going to be on site at the Players Championship, the Arnold Palmer, the Valspar, there's another one, the Honda Classic, and potentially the President's Cup this year. So I'm going to have reports from the grounds from all of those golf courses. We'll actually be able to like measure the length of the rough. I'm going to go live, walk around the golf course, do that sneakily as I can because you're not really supposed to do that, and give you guys a little bit of an inside scoop. So look forward to that. Make sure to subscribe if you guys want to see all of that because it's going to be of huge importance going forward. All right, so we're just going to talk about all the studs, and then we'll start jumping around a little bit after the studs here and start talking about some of my core plays. I'll start at the top of the board, John Rahm. He's unavoidable at this point. DraftKings finally did the right thing and almost put him in a price tier of his own. Right? He's at $11,600. It's a whole $600 more than Justin Thomas. And after Patrick Cantlay, he's almost a whole $1,200, $2,000 more expensive than the entire field, which is appropriate, right? He's by far the best player in the field. He's a great course fit here. You can see he's still number 1 in terms of recent form, course fit, and total model rank. And in terms of projection, yeah, he's almost 15 clear of everyone else in the field. So he's in my player pool. He's unavoidable at this point. I have his projected cut right here at 98.4%. A lot of that also comes down to the size of the field. There's only 132 players here, which means if it's top 65 in ties, we're expecting 72, 73 players to make the cut. That's at least 62, 63% right there, if not higher, right? Sometimes we get 75, 78 guys through the cut. If that's the case, he's almost a pure lock to make it here. He's a local guy. He literally lives on this golf course. He plays here not all that often, right? He's usually at his normal house. This is a more of a vacation home for him. But guys like him, Tony Finau, Phil Mickelson, they all own houses here and all play here from time to time. I believe I know Phil's not on the field. If he was, he'd be an intriguing fit, right? Because he's an aggressive player. He loves that risk reward aspect. But guys like a John Rahm, they do get a boost for me in that department. It's not something that I typically like doing just because it's a little bit of a narrative based thing. But at the same time, he's the best player in the world, right? He's the best course fit in the world per the numbers. That just makes him an even better pick here. I have him projected as one of the highest, if not the highest owned guy on the slate. Yeah, he's the highest owned guy on the slate at 23.8%. And it's worth it. I'm going to have right around 35%, which is going to at least give me a little bit of leverage on the field. If he ends up being extremely high owned in some of these higher dollar contests, so be it, right? I'm going to have right around that 35% number, which at the very least is probably going to be the matching the field in that circumstance. Next up, we have Justin Thomas, who was my sleeper pick this week. He's becoming less and less of a sleeper as the week goes on. We had him closer to single-digit ownership when I made this video earlier. Now he's at 15.3. So it's definitely been adjusted. People have kind of figured out the whole JT thing. I mean, he started gaining strokes putting last week at the Farmers Insurance, or a couple weeks ago at the Farmers Insurance Open. He's one of the best ball strikers in the world to begin with. He loves this golf course, has played well here in the past. So he is going to be in my player pool, especially with some of the withdrawals that we've had. You're able to get more access to some of these guys up top, right? Like Webb Simpson, Harris English. I meant to mention that earlier. They did withdraw, and that was this afternoon. So maybe you saw it. Most likely you did. But all of this is adjusted for that. They've been taken out of the player pool. All of the ownership has been distributed as needed. So Patrick Cantlay is a fade for me this week. The approach play, the last two rounds last week were atrocious. The week before that, when he was in contention, it was the same thing. Over the weekend, his irons completely failed him. And that's a problem in any field, but particularly when you have all these other studs in the field. If you do that, you're not even going to crack the top five. You're going to get passed by 10 to 15 people in this level of field. Last week, when all the studs were over there in Saudi, he got away with it a little bit, right? He finished fourth place. That would have not been the case with all the studs here. So he's going to be a fade for me. That is a glaring issue. People are expecting him to be lower owned than he is. I still have him at 18.6%. People look at him as one of the best players in the world. And anytime you have somebody that's a quote unquote one of the best players in the world, a lot of the casuals play the shit out of him. And people know Cantlay. He won the FedEx Cup, guys. He won that huge playoff win over Bryson. I mean, that's all literally anyone talks about with Patrick Cantlay, and deservingly so. That was an absolute show. He's going to be high owned for quite some time. He's going to be Webb Simpson from a year ago. He was in the same category. Everybody loved playing Webb Simpson because he had won a bunch of golf tournaments. And at Webb Simpson type of courses, he was always 25 to 30% owned, just a fan favorite. That's somebody that Patrick Cantlay is becoming, and it's hard to play those guys unless it's a perfect course fit, unless there's no holes in their game. And that approach play, the weakness is enough, right? If we take a look at the last 24 measured rounds, it's not just an eye test thing. He's legitimately been horrible with the approach play. For his standards, gaining just 1.7 strokes gained per round is horrible. That's like 3 times less than where he's normally gaining. So it's not just an eye test thing with Patrick Cantlay. And I don't know why it's not a bigger talking point around the industry. That's a glaring difference from where he is. And I see your comment down there, Gene. You said, is Webb out? Yes, he's absolutely out this week. Don't know why. They didn't say why he withdrew. Also didn't say why we also had a couple of the other withdrawals. I'm assuming COVID. Usually they'll say like due to injury or something like that. Usually it's because of COVID when they don't say it. Hideki Matsuyama at $10,400. I would play him. He's a past champion, but he's super high owned, right? And there's guys that I like just a little bit more. I mean, Victor Hovland, my favorite play on the slate. Xander Schauffele, who has elite course history here. I wasn't sold on him to begin the week. I considered him as a fade. But when you just consider like what he's good at, he's super long and straight off the tee. He's an aggressive long iron player, can start to really fill it up with the putter at times. That's what we're looking for here. Same thing with Jordan Spieth. And Jordan Spieth started to show that last week. He gained in his 2 rounds at Pebble Beach over 6 strokes on approach, which is back to what we saw really towards the middle of 2021. And that's the archetype that take this place down. Jordan Spieth, much like Xander Schauffele, also elite course history here. So I want a ton of access to all 3 of these players. So taking a Cantlay and Hideki just isn't possible, especially when I still like these guys up top. And the byproduct of me liking a lot of these guys, especially in these top 5 guys that I have marked down here, is I'm going to take a bunch of shots in the 6K range. There are a bunch of ball strikers down there that I think have a shot here. I mean, Kyle Stanley's won this golf tournament, for God's sakes. And if you take a look at the last 8 to 10 years history, a lot of random guys at 100, 150 to 1 won this golf tournament. So that's something to note. People that are just complete long shots, that are really good ball strikers, though, have won this golf tournament. Not just any long shot, right? That's not what I'm trying to say. But there are archetypes that we can look for, particularly guys that are just dog shit putters, that might get it done this week. So that's going to be my build. I like these guys up top a whole lot. If that guy in that 6K range ends up going out there and finishing in the top 15, we have a guy in the top of the 6K range finish in the top 10, that type of thing. That's more than enough to be optimal as well, because you're expecting the cream of the field this week to absolutely rise to the top. That's what you get at these ball striking type of venues. Is the best players typically tend to win, right? Tend to be the guys in contention. So you want to fit as many of them as possible into your lineups. So that's the theory here, right? And anytime you're taking some of those guys in the 6K range, they're inherently coming with less than 1% ownership, unless there's a glaring misprice, which also makes your lineup unique, right? So you can take some of these chalky guys up top and still get away with it. So it has a dual purpose there, a little bit of a dual benefit as well. So in terms of roster construction, we're going to talk about strategy in detail at the later parts of this video. But I'm probably going to try and take 2 of them, right? So if I'm taking Jon Rahm, it's going to be tough, right? So we might have to be Jon Rahm and one of these guys like a Sam Burns or something like that. But if I'm taking somebody like a Victor Hovland, I can take a Jordan Spieth if I want to, right? I'm going to have enough salary to take 2 of these guys right around $10,000. But in total, I'm looking to try and fit 2 of these guys into as many lineups as humanly possible. Brooks Koepka is a 2-time champion at this golf course, $9,400, so appropriately priced. But because of the Webb Simpson news, he's actually getting a little bit more ownership than he was before. You can see Xander's getting a significant amount more than what he was before. But I can't look past the form. I mean, the guy has been in absolute dreadful form over his last 24 measured rounds. Go ahead and check it out. He's one of the only guys, actually, I can guarantee you, he's the only guy for quite some time that's losing across all 4 major statistical categories. Yes, even off the tee, approach, around the green, and putting. That is horrible, guys. I mean, that's as bad as it gets. Let's see the next time we find someone that loses across all 4 major statistical categories. I'm telling you, it's going to take some time. Let's see. Still nothing. Wow. This is embarrassing. Okay, so the first one would be Alex Noren, the whole way down at $7,100. And you're telling me we have to pay $9,400 for Brooks Koepka? Yeah, that's all you have to know, guys. That should show you everything you need to know about his game. Sam Burns at $9,300. He's a great pivot off of Brooks Koepka. And again, guys, I like Brooks. He's from right down the road. He's one of my favorite players in the world. That's atrocious. That's one of the ugliest shots gained things, categories or profiles for a player I've seen in a long time. It's beyond concerning at this point. It's an established problem. Sam Burns, though, at $9,300 makes a lot of sense. He's played well at golf courses with this weird type of grass type. He's a ball striker, long off the tee. He's also extremely aggressive. He's no stranger to going out there and shooting 7 or 8 under par. And to win this golf tournament, you need 2 of those ceiling rounds. Historically, that's what it's taken. You've had to take this golf course low 2 rounds. You're probably going to get bitten in one of your 4 golf rounds, and you're probably going to get one in around 2, 3 under par. That's the archetype for winning this golf tournament, getting it to 17, 18 under par. So Sam Burns, he's the exact type of player that can do that. And in 2021, he was the only player on tour, that's not the best way to say this. He is the highest percentage of rounds of shots gained over 5 in a single round of anyone on tour. I believe it was 7% too, which 5 shots gained to the field is like a 0.01 percentile type of performance. And he did that at an extremely high rate. So that's just his volatility. That's what we're looking for at this golf course. Daniel Berger has a ton of injury concerns. In some of his pressers this week, we've had a lot of people kind of try to poke him about it, try to ask him about it. And he's completely deflected. And in fact, the last time they asked him, we got the most information out of him that we got all week. And it said that he'd figure out this weekend whether he's playing at the Honda Classic. So he wouldn't talk about this week at all. But he did say that he expected to be playing this weekend, or at least figuring out whether he's playing this weekend, which, again, makes me think that he's going to be playing this week. But the fact that he's even having to, reconsider playing at the Honda Classic tells you that the injury's still there, right? It's something that he's still dealing with. People that have seen him on the range have said that he hasn't been there for all that much time at all. His practice rounds have been 9 holes rather than 18. So $9,200, I'm going to be off of him. And especially if he's 16.5% owned. A lot of that web ownership also went to a Daniel Berger, making him even chalkier and frankly, even in a worse play this week. Everybody likes Scotty Scheffler. Actually, let's go into a few questions before we move on. Let's see. Jason says Patrick Cantley's a fade because he can't win, because he can't play, you could say, huh? He said you love Xander. Yeah, I completely agree. And he said with Webb, who do you think I should pivot to? So the main pivot for me, if you have Webb Simpson, it'd make a lot of sense to go to Sam Burns because he's cheaper. I believe Webb was a 90. No, actually, no, he was a little bit less expensive. He was $8,600. Sorry, I thought he was the $9,600 player. That I forget who was in that range before. But yeah, so if you're down here with Webb, Webb's at $8,600. Adam Scott's somebody I added to my player pool. I don't think he's the strongest pivot you could go to. I would try to open up a little bit of salary and get up to either a Louis or a Tony Finau. We're going to talk about them in literally probably a minute here. There's some of my favorite plays on the slate. We're going to talk about Scotty Scheffler before we get into these two guys there, though. I love Scotty this week. I still do. I have an outright bet on Scotty Scheffler. But the whole DFS thing with Scotty Scheffler right now is starting to get a little bit hairy. He's projected to be the second highest owned guy in the slate at 22.1%. Everyone and anyone wrote him up this week. I was one of the first ones to get my content out there. It's like, oh, Scotty Scheffler, this is the week. In a field of all these studs, he's going to be overlooked. I was like, it's finally time. He had a few lackluster performances where he went out there, finished 25th twice in a row. Everyone wants to play Scotty Scheffler this week. It's annoying as hell. At this point, I'm considering making him a fade in DFS, just riding my outright bet ticket on him because this is a whole game theory sport, right? If you're in cash, play Scotty Scheffler. I think he makes a ton of sense. He might be my favorite play in the slate. I still might play 35% of him because, like I said before, if we take that studs and duds approach, it might not matter, right? As long as we're being a little bit cognizant about our ownership, or at least maybe leaving $100 or $200 left of salary on the table, we can get away with it. So I haven't made that decision yet. He's still in my player pool. As of right now, in my last build, I have him at 35%. But I've seen him projected to be right around 27, even 28% owned at a couple other spots around the industry, which, God, I hope that's wrong because, I mean, that's atrocious, guys. From a game theory perspective, that's a fade. It's an automatic fade. It doesn't matter who they are. Unless John Rahm is $6,000 on accident at the U.S. Open or something like that, it's a fade. So we'll have to see. I haven't made that decision on that yet. Again, as of right now, he's still in the pool. Bubba Watson's still a sleeper pick for me because of the withdrawal to Webb, also with Harris English. He has gotten a little bit higher owned than he was before, but he's a clear misprice. That's, first off, a very, very volatile golfer, but also a perfect course fit. So it's a tough situation, right? You know that you're overpaying for your guy. But the flip side to that is that he's coming in with single-digit ownership, and no one else in this range other than Brooks Koepka, who is deservingly single-digit owned, is in that range. So he's a great ownership pivot. If you're taking a ton of chalky guys, let's say you really like Russell Henley, right? He's going to be 20% owned. Let's say you really like Harold Varner III, 15%. Let's say you really like Seamus Power, also at 15%. A good way to go ahead and just take all those chalky options is to mix them with a Bubba Watson. So that's how I would be using a Bubba Watson. I don't think he should be in your core lineups in a single entry or anything like that. Any high dollar stuff, I wouldn't be playing him. But if you're playing in some of these large field GPPs, like the 50-cent GPP, for example, which I know a bunch of people in the Discord are, he's a great option to diversify a lineup just with one single player alone. You can take the chalk with the other 5 spots, and you're going to have a unique lineup most likely. Let's move down a little bit further. Tony Finau and Louis, some of my favorite plays on the slate. I said that those are my ideal pivots off of a Webb Simpson. Again, I know they're more expensive, but try and save the salary if you can. They'll be worth it, especially with Louis Oosthuizen. His 2 finishes here are a third place finish and an 11th place finish. He's $8,800, which is more than fair. If there's anything that he's great at, it's that iron play. He's also solid off the tee. He's not elite by any means, but he's more than good enough to get by. And the real key part is at those golf courses with this hybrid surface, much like a Jordan Spieth, Sam Burns as well, he has had a ton of success. So from all fronts, pretty much everything we're looking at this week, he checks the boxes. I mean, around the green play, he's been solid. The only question mark, and it's a fair question mark, is that we haven't seen him play in quite some time. And quite frankly, it's a valid concern. But look at John Rahm, look at Patrick Cantlay. They came back from 2-3 month layoffs and were winning that golf tournament capital. It looked insane. They got it to past 25 under par. Louis Oosthuizen, I'm not saying that he's going to come out with quite that same type of vengeance. He's a little bit older, right? So he needs the time off anyways. He needs it just to recuperate his body. His swing has literally never changed. So if there's anybody that can just come off of the shelf, much like a Dustin Johnson, right? That move hasn't changed for quite some time. It's these guys that have these natural swings. So I'm not as worried about it with a Louis as it would be for some of these other people, particularly if like a young guy, one of these Corn Ferry Tour guys took a month or two off. That's a completely different story, right? They're working on their swings. They're still establishing their swing. If they take time off due to injury or whatever reason, like Matthew Wolff, when he took time off, you knew he was going to struggle because his swing is far from established. He's working on that thing. He has that wacky swing move in everyone's way, as opposed to Louis Oosthuizen, who probably has the most rhythmic and controlled swing in all of golf. Adam Scott, who we'll talk about here in a second, might give him a little bit of a run there for his money, though. Tony Finau's from the area. He's a member at this golf course. He's a great course fit, long off the tee, great with the approach play. Putting, not his specialty, which again is something that doesn't really hold you back here at TPC Scottsdale. I'm surprised he's only at 12.6%. I mean, you would think that he'd be coming in with a lot of steam. I know the recent form doesn't look all that great with him. Number 37 for the field. In terms of these stud tier guys, that is way below par. I'm willing to forgive and forget that, though, especially at this ownership level. He's a great course fit. He seems to like this venue. I mean, of course, he's a member at this golf course. Obviously, he likes it. So he will be a staple in my player pool. Matt Fitzpatrick, he's an unfortunate opportunity cost exclusion from my player pool. I just can't play everyone in this range. I really like Bubba as a pivot. Also really like Finau and Usti. And I also really like Adam Scott, which we're going to get to here in a second. So Matt Fitzpatrick does not make the pool. Adam Scott at $8,500. He hasn't played this golf course in his life. We haven't seen him play much golf. But when we saw him in the later half of 2021, when we saw him in the fall, the guy looked unbelievable with the irons. Like, he was back to Adam Scott level golf. And off the tee, he was extremely accurate. He'd actually lost a few yards off the tee. He made some type of driver change, changing from a 47.5-inch driver to a 46-inch driver, which is now regulation. You can't have over a 46-inch driver now on the PGA Tour, or at least they're going to institute that here at some point. I'm not sure if they've done that already. He's been insane. He's been keeping the ball in play. The irons have been Adam Scott-like. I mean, when he gets close to the hole with the wedges, there's no better player on the PGA Tour. And at this golf course, that is exactly what plays. And he was coming in right around 8% owned about 2 days ago. It went up to 9% yesterday. Now it's at 10%. So people are catching on to the play, but he's still one of the lowest owned options in this range, right? You got to go the whole way down to a Tom Hoagie to get somebody that's super low owned, and he's just way mispriced. I mean, for this field, just ridiculous. And then you have to go the whole way up to a Bubba Watson to find someone lower owned. So in this middle 8K range, he's that lower owned pivot you can go to that is a great course fit and historically a great player for this golf course. You just have a few question marks about the form. You don't really know how he's playing. Seamus Power, $8,400. There's huge question marks about his swing. We saw that during pressure time. And again, you could argue that he's mispriced here, right? He's went on that run for 3-4 events where he was finishing in the top 20 for all those events. They were weaker field events. You didn't have nearly the field that we have for this week. And in this type of field, he probably would have been finishing like 30th or 40th. And we wouldn't have known about it, right? We wouldn't be talking about it at all. So it's a case of box score watching with people really liking Seamus Power. We take a look at the shot. Is that better? Can you hear me? Oh boy. How long did that do that? Hopefully not too long ago. Hopefully it's better. Was it like a couple minutes or was it like 10 minutes? Because that would be really annoying. Word. Has no clue we're here, dude. So Continental, like, I understand that it's frustrating. You have to understand I'm looking at the projections, right? I'm going through them. It's on another tab. So it's not like I'm ignoring you, man. I understand that's frustrating, but I can't have both things up at the same time. So give me a little bit of a break there, okay? Let's go over a few questions as it happened again. I apologize there. Um, I see that like you guys were spamming that in the chat, but again, there's no way for me to see it. It's literally on another tab. Let's go over some of the questions that were further up in the chat. I said the $7,500 range is the most interesting. I love Gooch. Yeah, I'm going to be all over him as well. And Putnam, who no one's talking about. Yeah, nobody's talking about Putnam, even though he's in that really good stretch of form. So yeah, we'll talk about him. CBO says, would you play Burns over Watson in a single entry? Yes, I would. I think Burns is a better play, particularly for single entry type of stuff. And Putnam ownership, we'll get to that here in a second. I believe you can see it on the screen there anyways. Let's see. Yeah, it's at 12.7%. So I have him pretty high right there. Thoughts on HV3? He's a fade for me. We're going to get to him here in a second. Anytime somebody like that breaks through for the first time, they're not going to play very well the next time out, at least 99% of the time. Sorry about I had to get through these muted chats, guys. My bad. Word. And then I think, is there any other questions? I want to make sure I'm not missing any because I know there was the little bit of a scrum there for a bit. All right, it looks like we're good. Looks like we're all caught back. Are you joking? Yeah, dude, I know. Cool. Only missed Henley. Let's talk about Russell Henley. Good. Thank you for letting me know what we missed out on because I had no idea how long that was for. So Russell Henley, guys, and I went on quite a rant on Russell Henley. So maybe it was a good thing. In summary, okay, Russell Henley, by the numbers, one of the best plays on the slate. In fact, probably the best play on the slate per the dollar. You can see he's getting over a stroke ball striking per round. Historically, though, we know over the last 10, 15 years, Russell Henley ain't that good of a player. He's like a top 80 player at best on the PGA Tour. So we know he's playing well over his baseline. And that's what I'm betting on here, right? He's somebody who at some point is going to regress. He goes into these streaks where he's really good for 3-4 weeks at a time, and then he disappears for a month or two at a time. That's his game. That's really the type of player that he is. And to get significant ownership on a Russell Henley, you got to put 35, 40% ownership into it. So it's not that fun. It's not something that I'm really looking to go ahead and do. And I want to pivot elsewhere, right? Because I really like Corey Connors. Corey Connors is a great ball striker. He's coming in with a little bit lower ownership. We talked about Adam Scott earlier, or even going down to an Abraham Answer, who I'm not the biggest fan of. I don't like the fact that he's not long off the tee. I think that really tends to hurt him at times, especially at some of these longer golf courses. But that's not the case this week. We're dealing with a short golf course. He should be able to lean into that really solid approach play. And he's also been a really good putter at this hybrid surface. At some of those golf courses, like a Sawgrass over there at the Valspar Championship, he's had a bunch of good putting performances. So that's something that gave him a little bit of a boost. So that's why we're fading Russell Henley, right? He's playing well above his head. It could come back and bite us in the ass. So much like Tom Hoagie. That was something that I was going over during that. And I can see Hoagie with the win, just laughing. Yeah, man, he won last week, and that was Russell Henley, right? He was in that same type of build where he fit all the metrics. It was like, dang, but he's super overpriced. He's super overowned. It could bite us in the ass, right? That's what I'm going to say, but I'm fading him. It's a pure game theory perspective there. And again, 21% ownership at the 8K range is like somebody in the stud tier range being 35 or 40% owned. You have to look at it with a relative type of lens. It's like somebody down here in the 6K range. When they get to 10%, that's like mega chalk, right? That's like somebody like 40%. That's a stud tier guy. So that's what we got to think about it that way a little bit. All good mistakes happen. I'm glad you guys aren't crucifying me yet with that. That's good. Sam Earl says Connors or Answer. If I had to choose between the two, I would probably take Answer just because of what it buys you a little bit further down the board. I believe there's a $400 difference in price there. Let's see. Yeah, $400 price gap there. I would like what it would depend on what you're able to get with it, but I'm assuming it's a pretty solid upgrade. Tom T says, can't ignore Seamus Power 16 in his last 20 rounds, shot in the 60s. Yeah, man, he's good recent form, right? This is a different field. This is a different golf course. He's been playing resort style golf courses. That was in the fall swing. Most of those golf courses, extremely wide fairways, extremely receptive greens. This is a major championship type venue. If you put Seamus Power on a major championship, he's going to miss the cut more often than he makes them for the next year. It's a difference in skill gap. It's a difference in skill set. So while I agree with you, man, this is just a different type of venue, a different type of golf course. And if we take a look at something like the last 20 rounds, that's a small sample size, right? That's not a super large sample size. It's easy to fix numbers to make them look good. So again, I understand it. I understand the shots gained numbers, but that's not a skill set that really plays at this golf course. He's somebody who's a resort style kind of specialist. You saw when he got into contention. You saw when he was at Monterey Peninsula. That's a scoreable golf course for most players. If you have the around the green play, because it's tough, even for a country club. That Monterey Peninsula course, getting up and down there is not easy, much below the tour average for getting up and down. And you saw when Seamus Power didn't have his approach play there, he was missing those greens. It was a shit show. He couldn't get up and down for his life. He bled like 5 strokes at the easiest golf course on the PGA Tour. That is exactly what could happen here at this golf course. I mean, this is a harder golf course to get up and down than Monterey. In general, just a harder course in general, because it's, just it has all the undulation, has all the bunkers that it does here. Yeah, man, that's going to be a problem for Seamus Power. I can't really get behind playing him. It's a recent form thing. It's why everyone wants to play Russell Henley too. You look at the last 24 measured rounds, and he looks like he's the best player on tour. Russell Henley's far from the best player on tour. He's like the 60th best player on tour. Seamus Power is like the 30th or 40th best player on tour. That's nothing against them, but we have guys that are in the top 25 priced $100 more than them that have been proven to be that way, that have elite course history. Those are the guys that I'm relying on, the guys that have a large term sample size. Last 20 rounds is great. It's especially good for some of these smaller field events, for some of these weaker field events. But when we have guys that we know who they are, these are more than proven commodities, guys that have been here for 5 or 6 years, we can kind of put that aside. Hollywood Hoagie Prime for Hangover. I would hope he's celebrating this week, man. I really hope he's been waiting for a win for so long. I mean, he's been in final groups with Tiger Woods before. He's been in final groups with Rory McIlroy, best players in the world before, and hasn't come through. Yeah, man, he really should. How did Dead Potter not get invited to those? How's he not a sponsorship invite? They're really losing out on some of those PIP dollars, some of their sponsorship money, marketing, all that type of stuff. I agree. It's just a really bad business decision from the Waste Management Open to not have Ted Potter here. Seamus crashed and burned for sure. Yeah, man, he got the yips, especially with the around the green play. And how about Adam Scott for GBP? I like him as an ownership pivot, just like a Bubba Scott. I just call him Bubba Scott, Bubba Watson. Same idea there. Agreed. I'm fading Power this week. Yeah, we'll have to see. And what do you think comes out of nowhere, like Bo Hossler? Oh, we'll get to that. There's a few guys. Like I said, I'm trying to fit in at least 2, maybe even 3 of these guys up top. So we're going to get creative down low. That's a way to put it. We're going to have plenty of guys down low that are going to be real ugly plays that we're just going to have to take. All right, let's talk about H3. I know someone was asking about him before. He's coming off a win. So much like Tom Hoagie, when these guys break through for the first time, I have a really hard time playing them. They are going to go out there. They're going to celebrate. I'm not saying it's irresponsible celebrating. There's going to be things that they do this week financially, just logistically, that are going to take a lot of time away from golf. Like going and getting all their finances figured out because they finally have real money. That's a legitimate thing that these 2 guys are going to be doing this week. And that's something that a lot of people forget about. That's a legitimate part of this whole process. Sure, they're playing golf this week, but their life just changed. Not like a little bit. Their life just completely changed. And I think a lot of people forget about that, particularly when this is the type of money in play that it is for these 2 golfers. Yeah, I'm going to be fading him for that reason. I mean, the guy just had a kid too. No better time for him to win. I'm so happy for HV3. He's got to bring it over to the PGA Tour now. That'd be pretty nice. I've been a backer on him on outright tickets for quite some time. So we're hoping it comes through sometime soon. Taylor Gooch, I know dropping birdies, talked about him before. This price makes no sense. Much like a Abraham Answer up here at $7,900. It's why it's hard to try and get to a Henley or a Hoagie. There's these great pivots that are even cheaper than them that we can go to. Taylor Gooch, not the longest player on tour, but because we're playing in elevation this week, a 7,300 yard par 71 isn't nearly as long as it looks on the scorecard. This is somebody who over his last 24 measured rounds pretty much giving us everything we're looking for, right? This isn't the end all be all, but he does look good with the ball striking. In terms of more of a long-term approach, taking a look at somebody like a Taylor Gooch, you can see the numbers just as solid, right? The off the tee play, maybe not as solid over like the last 2-3 months. Around the green play has always been there. The putting, while it can be inconsistent at times, he's more of a spike player. When he has his game, when he's making cuts, he tends to do it and compete, right? When he doesn't go out there and finish 60th place very often. But he also ejects himself from golf tournaments. So he's more of a GPP play for sure. So somebody that I'll be on this week, he's definitely getting his fair share of ownership. He's coming in lower owned than Luke List, lower owned than Andrew Putnam, right? So this is why I'm going to Taylor Gooch. It doesn't make sense. I mean, Andrew Putnam, he's coming in with all this great form. We're going to talk about him here in a second. It's intriguing, right? But there's guys around him that he's higher owned than. It makes no sense. Like he should be like 2-3% owned. If he was, I'd be playing him this week. It would make a whole lot of sense. I'd be getting to him. He shouldn't be chalk though, because his skill set is not really ideal for this place. At least in my humble opinion. Max Homa, I'll have to see if I can fit him in my player pool. He's about as average of a play as you can get this week. That's not a diss to him. It's also not a compliment to him. Luke List, he was higher owned at the beginning of the week. He was closer to 17, 18% in my algorithm. You can see that's calmed down a little bit. We got him at 13.7% right now. It's not quite as big a deal for him to win as I believe for these other two guys. Luke List, even though he hasn't won golf tournaments, he's done really, really well for himself, let's say. I mean, multiple second place finishes. He's gotten plenty of endorsements over his career. So it's not really that I'm fading. As much as it really just is that he's not as good as he is for $7,700. Again, Taylor Gooch is priced around him. We have guys even like Ricky Fowler that I'd rather get to, Keith Mitchell as well. So it's a little bit of opportunity cost as well. Just not really a priority for me. Somebody that is a priority for me is Keith Mitchell, though. If we take a look at his recent form, and these are at golf courses that by no means fit his game. So on the flip side of somebody like a Seamus Power, right, where he was at the perfect golf course for his game. Golf courses where he should pretty much finish top 5 every single week. Keith Mitchell was at golf courses where he should have probably missed the cut every single week. Short golf courses, you got to be accurate off the tee. Hell, you even got to be good putters at those events. Keith Mitchell's a bomber. He's somebody who's super long off the tee, has no regards for accuracy, gets really hot with the approach play from time to time, and is a streaky putter too. He's pretty much streaky with everything but the off the tee play, where he's pretty much always a stud. You can see that has been the case over these last 24 measured rounds. But you can see he's been pretty decent with the approach play, gaining with the putter, gaining around the green. These are things that we don't typically see from a Keith Mitchell. And if we take a look at just the last 2 events specifically, so his last 8 measured rounds, well, it's actually his last 7 measured rounds because it's for the Amex and then the week before that over there in YLI, he's gaining over 2 strokes per round with the approach. So he turned that around in a big way over his last few measured events. The last measured event he had last week wasn't included in that sample size, but he ended up finishing in the top 10. So I can guarantee you he had an extremely solid week with the approach play. I can't tell you offhand what that number was, but I can tell you because of his finishing position that he certainly gained with the approach play. So at $7,500, he's definitely going to be one of my favorite plays this week. This is a golf course that much better suited for his game. In terms of the distance, he'll be able to utilize that here. He'll be able to take advantage of some of those risk-reward holes, and he's fairly priced at $7,500. Ricky Fowler is not in my player pool because he was higher owned at the beginning of the week, so I have to adjust for this. I'm actually going to make him a blank for right now. He was like 15% owned over there on Monday. When I first ran my ownership numbers, he was extreme chalk. The fact that he's only 6.5% right now, actually, he's one of the lowest owned options in this range, does make him intriguing. So we'll have to check on that. In terms of course fit, it's not ideal, but course history is one of the best in the field. So that is something to keep an eye on. Moving on a little bit further down the board, Joel Damon, he's like on somebody that I respect in the industry that knows Joel Damon says he's like on a week-long bender. Apparently that like 3rd place finish or whatever. It's like the equivalent of him winning a golf tournament. So yeah, I'm not going to have a ton of investment behind Joel Damon, at least from the inside source I know says that he's enjoying himself. You know, he took that 3rd place money, which is like 600, 700, no, less than that, probably like 400, 500K. He's having himself a week. All right, let's go through a couple of the comments down here. Hoagie was traveling with his mom last week, and this week, no shit. Wait, so before he won, he was traveling? That's kind of nuts. That's kind of nuts. Ekro is still a cheap long shot. Yeah, he's still low owned, right? So last week he was pretty chalk, right? People wanted to go out and play him, and he started off really well. He's low owned this week. I don't really understand it. And you guys want to stack multiple studs up top? Take Brandon Hagee. Thank you later. Oh, we're gonna get to some of those guys down low, and Brandon Hagee is one of those guys that we'll be considering. So don't worry about that. And Chandler says, "I'm back. Sorry I missed everything so far. Anything important I missed?" Pretty much everything I said, but you're able to watch this on replay afterwards. So you can make sure to go ahead and check up on that afterwards. In general, though, we're looking at a studs and duds approach. You said, oh, no, his mom was at the tournament with him. Gotcha. Makes sense. And CBO says Silverman. I'm amazed that you know who that is, but yes, we'll talk about Silverman. He's a Monday qualifier. He had a very, very strong showing at the Monday qualifier too. So yes, I agree with you, but that is like a sleeper and a half. Dropping Birdies mentioned it earlier in the week in one of the comments, and I forgot the guy existed, and I was like, wait, did he Monday qualify this week or something like that? And he did, and he's a legit pro. So, and Damon twittered pics of some of his IV after Taco Tuesday. I would not have any lineups with Joel Damon this week. This should tell you everything you need to know. I was not alone in hearing that he was on a bender this week. Let's go down to the bottom of the 7K range, and then we'll talk about the 6K range this week, which is going to be interesting. We're going to have to take some guys down there. Unlike last week where I didn't try to take many of those guys down there at all. All right, so at $7,400, we're going to have Matt Kuchar. He has elite course history here. Makes no sense. In terms of course fit, again, it doesn't seem like it should be there. Right? He's number 100 in the field in terms of course fit, but the guy gets it done here. In terms of the recent form, it's actually looked pretty decent. Outside of the approach play, which hasn't really been there, he's been himself with the putter, been himself around the green, and the off the tee play, a little bit sneaky here. I'm going to go ahead and show you this on the season-long rankings over here because we don't have that over there for the last 24 measured rounds. Look at the driving distance. This 183 number isn't as bad as you would have expected it to be. I mean, this is typically like one of the shortest hitters on the PGA Tour. He's starting to get it out there like 300 yards. I mean, he's started to add distance to his game. I believe they said that he's using the longest driver you're allowed to use right now, which I believe in terms of regulation might be 47 inches until they roll it back the whole way to 46 inches. Then he's going to lose some of that distance. So that's going to be unfortunate when that happens for Matt Kuchar. But again, he's been good at this golf course before without that distance in the bag. And if he's able to take advantage of some of these risk-reward holes a little bit more than in the past, that's just a little bit of a boost as well. Gary Woodland, a past winner at this golf course. In terms of the skill set fit, it is ideal. He's also coming in at super low ownership at 5.2%. A lot of that because the recent form hasn't looked great, at least from a finishing perspective. Because you can see over his last 24 measured rounds, he's been at least all right with the approach rate, at least all right with the putting. I mean, if you look at the finishes, it's a bunch of missed cuts. You would assume that he's just bleeding strokes around the field, but that hasn't really been the case. It's been a little bit better than the eye test, which is at least why he's in consideration for me. I mean, he's won at this golf tournament before, and he's also super low owned. KH Lee also has played well at this golf tournament. Good ball striking, low owned. Same thing with Russell Knox. While he doesn't really have the course history, he's in really good recent form. If you take a look at his ball striking stats, Russell Knox is getting 0.6 shots gained approach per round. That's outstanding. And again, that's exactly what we're looking for this week. And Cam Davis down here as well. He's one of the more aggressive players on the PGA Tour. So where he really gets a boost with his projection is with the birdie or better percentage. Of course, if you take a look at the last 50 measured rounds, the recent form for Cam Davis doesn't really look all that good at all. But if we take a little bit more of a long-term perspective on him, the only category he's not gaining in is on approach. That's where he's inconsistent. Doesn't always have that iron play that we're looking for. But when he does, he competes because he's a very well-rounded player outside that skill set. And yeah, he usually goes into a little bit of form right with that, right? He tends to be a little bit streaky with the irons. So we take a look at the recent play, just a slight gainer. So not really anything indicating that he's on with his irons of late. So that's why his ownership's where it's at. That's why it's only there at 5.6%. So he's far from a safe play. He would definitely be a safer play if he was coming in with that good form with the irons. But in large field GBP, still worth a few shots. Chucky 3 sticks. He's had good course history here, but outside that, not really anything to look at. Denny McCarthy has putted well on these weird surfaces, the 3-way hybrid.
but not really anyone I'm looking at from the ball striking perspective. Keegan Bradley and Aaron Wise, on the other hand, ball striking phenoms, people that are gaining a ton of strokes with the irons. Take a look at the last 24 measured rounds. A third of a stroke for Keegan, almost a third of a stroke for Aaron Wise. Both relatively good off the tee as well, gaining close to a quarter of a stroke per round in that category. Around the green gaining, and then with the putting, right? Keegan, his normal self, losing a ton of strokes with the putter. Again, Hideki's won here twice. Brooks has won here twice, so it's not impossible for somebody like Keegan to have success. But Aaron Wise, who's typically one of the worst putters on tour, gaining with the putter. And that has been what's really unlocked a lot of his success. And outside the last tournament where he went out and missed the cut, has been somebody that we've wanted to have in lineup. So I'll be back there with an Aaron Wise. Brendan Grace has a late course history here. The course fit is atrocious. I mean, even the recent form is pretty atrocious for somebody like a Brendan Grace. But he's one of those players, much like a Jordan Spieth, a Dustin Johnson. Those are really the only ones that come to mind right now. I'm sure there's a lot more that this is the case for, that can just snap out of form. They do it out of nowhere. They've been known for that. They're players that are just extremely volatile. You won't really see the form building up. Whereas guys like a Justin Thomas, you'll see them building up towards something. They're extremely predictable. You tend to slowly, gradually get better as weeks goes on. That's not the case with Brendan Grace at all. He just snaps out of nowhere, which makes him a really solid play in GPPs, right? Especially at 3.7%. So I'm going to have him. The course history has been there. Kevin Stroman, a better course fit. He's a really solid iron player. It's really all I have to say about him, though. Carlos Ortiz, another one of these volatile players that can just go off from time to time. And when he does, tends to compete. So at 5.4%, a really solid GPP type of play. Matt Jones, just a little bit underpriced for his skill set, his pedigree. Also a really solid iron player. Mino Pereira, we talked about him in detail during the Value Picks video. Also somebody who's one of the best ball strikers on tour. You can see the model absolutely loves him. Has him as the seventh best player in the field, period, regardless of price. Down here, Troy Merritt, Adam Hadwin, they were better plays at the shorter golf course. And again, even though this is at elevation, you're looking for ball strikers. And the ball strikers tend to be the guys that hit it a long way, that strike the ball with a lot of efficiency. Merritt and Hadwin, they had their week last week. They had their uses in our player pool last week. Not going to be a priority for me. If they end up being in like 3-4% of my lineups because I need them as a filler, so be it. Brendan Todd has had success here in the past. He's gained a ton of strokes on these greens with the flat stick, that is. But where does he not gain a ton of strokes on the flats, on the greens, right? I saw someone tweeting about that earlier this week. I get it. Good putter, right? It's Brendan Todd. He's $6,900, but he gains literally everywhere, right? So you could say that Brendan Todd gains at every golf course on the PGA Tour a lot more than his peers. So it doesn't really impress me as much as if it was Hideki Matsuyama is gaining 2 strokes per round here. Then you'd be saying something. So yeah, not going to be in my player pool. Just from the ball striking perspective, doesn't really bring anything to the table. Chris Kirk, on the other hand, has been great with the irons of late. Historically, a really solid iron player. If we take a look at some of the recent form metrics, you can see just above average, which if we take a look at the last 2 measured events, it's been a lot better than average. The off the tee play has been there, the around the green play as well. The putter right around average, which for him is pretty good. He's historically not the best putter. That's typically what tends to hold him back. Ches Reavie has won this golf tournament before. He was one of those quote unquote random type of guys that have won this golf tournament in the past, but he's an elite long iron player. So it kind of makes sense. You know, with the approach play with Ches Reavie can get absolutely nuclear. In 2021, he gained over 7 strokes on approach in an event 5 times. He's one of the only players in the world that was able to accomplish that feat. Ches Reavie, when he's on with the irons, and particularly when he's really dialed in with the irons, you're not going to find a better player in the world. Martin Laird is going to be the model pick of the week. If you take a look at a course fit perspective, he's top 20 in the field. And this takes shots gained into perspective, right? So this isn't just, is a guy in general good at these things? It's good. It's by how much. Like, it's weighted. And he's still one of the best players in the world in terms of his efficiency. If we take a look at why over the last 24 measured rounds. I'm sorry, I went a little bit too far down there. You can see he's gaining in every category but the putter. That's something that Laird's always bad at. Of course, he's much like a Sergio Garcia. Some of these bad putters like a Hideki Matsuyama, that's his bugaboo. But again, at TPC Sawgrass, all of that is forgiven. I'm going to go ahead and hop over here to the questions, see if there's anyone that we need to touch on. Let's see. Barry says, like Kuchar as a sneaky low on play this week. Yeah, people look at the ball striking. They're not really sold on his distance, but he's had success here in the past, and it's a huge sample size. So completely agree there. Says, thanks, I have to run best content for PG Online. Hey, I appreciate that, man. And yeah, dude, you're an OG. You've been here literally since I think I had like 20 subscribers or something like that. So I appreciate you coming by, man. Good luck. Enjoy tonight. Continental says thinking about playing the glove after looking like a 14 handicapper. Yeah, man, he was what 14 over after 2 rounds, something like that. He would be certainly low owned, that's for sure. And did I miss my thoughts on KH Yeah, I went over it real quickly, so you might have just missed it real quick. I like him. So good course history, really good ball striker, relatively low owned. So I kind of lumped him in with another guy up here. I lumped him in with Gary Woodland, where the recent form has kind of been a little bit shaky, right? It's not like he's been posting a bunch of top finishes, but he has the good course history here and historically at least a good course fit. So that's what we had for him. Aaron Wise is a sleeper. I'm not sure I'd categorize him a sleeper just because of the ownership, but in terms of just in general his price and how I think he's going to play, 100% agree. And I think that's what you were going with there. Yeah, at his price tag, man, I think he's going to finish in the top 10, top 15, which is going to be a huge value there for us. And thoughts on Peter Manotti, we'll get to him in the value section. I think his lack of ball striking acumen isn't really the best fit here. And there's a few guys that have some good ball striking down low. So we will touch on a few pivots for you off of a Manotti. You can still play Manotti, of course. I just don't think he's the best course fit. Let's talk about Stuart Sink here at $6,800. He's been great with the irons, historically better on these short golf courses. And because we're at elevation, I would almost classify this as a short golf course. It's not super short, but over the years, people that are long off the tee have also had success. Stuart Sink still long off the tee. So it's this weird blend of it's a short golf course, but it also rewards people that are long off the tee. He's long off the tee, but tends to succeed at these short golf courses. So is this a meeting of two really good trends for Stuart Sink? That's what I'm thinking. At $6,800, he's somebody that I'm going to be playing at pretty much no ownership. I have him there at 1.4%. He hasn't looked all that good of late, but he's sneaky long for his age and certainly a really good iron player. You can see I'm not playing anyone like Hostler or Zach Johnson this week. I'm not doing the Charlie Hoffman thing again. All of my really good 6 of 6s were going to have Charlie Hoffman in them, and they got ruined. So, yeah, he's still dealing with the injury, by the way. I mean, it's only like 5-6 days later. So much like a Daniel Berger, I'm not going to be exposing myself to that because it's an unneeded risk. It's an unneeded level of stress in my life, particularly because I don't think that he's going to go out and win this golf tournament. Especially Daniel Berger, like to win a field of this strength, you got to be 100%. You can't be dealing with any type of physical ailment. It'd be one thing if we were playing at Pebble Beach last week where the field was complete dog shit. But that's not the case this week. Emiliano Grillo has elite course history here. He's an elite ball striker. He had something going on towards the end of last year where his swing completely fell away from him. I mean, historically, one of the best approach players on the PGA Tour. So even though he's gaining off the tee and on approach, we historically see much better numbers than this from Grillo. The unfortunate part, if we zoom out, you really get to see even more of that slump. And I'm going to go ahead and show you what I mean here. So we go to Grillo up here. You can see he's gaining off the tee, but even lower with his approach play. The approach play really went into a slump there. Whatever it was, he got a new coach, has started to hit the ball much better of late. Over his last 2 measured events to start 2022, significant gains off the tee and on approach again. So he's back to that mold that we saw before, one of the best ball strikers in the world. Grillo isn't somebody that's a great putter, but again, that's what we're looking for this week, right? The guys that can ball strike it really don't have to worry about the putting. Fits that archetype to a I don't even know what we're looking for there. You guys get what I'm saying. Michael Thompson at $6,700. It's just not a great course fit. He had his run a few weeks ago. He's probably going to go on a missed cut streak as per usual. Sahith Theegala, I'd be okay playing him here, but in terms of course fit, he's a little bit outmatched. There's just guys around him that are higher pedigree players. He's priced up from where he really should be. I mean, if he didn't go on that run for those 2 golf tournaments where we touted him, we were able to take advantage of him, he'd probably be $6,000 or $6,100 this week. And that's really what his price should probably be for this field. I was glad to take advantage of him when we did, but I don't think this is the week to dish him out. Dylan Fratelli, sneaky long, sneaky volatile in the positive direction. If we take a look at some of the recent form metrics with him, the approach play has been much better than of late. You can see still losing off the tee, around the green, also with the putter. But usually it's the other way around. Usually he's gaining in all of those categories, losing with the approach play. So perhaps he's finding something with that. And if he can get back to his normal baseline with the other three categories, could be worth a few looks. Garrett Higo's underpriced for his pedigree. He's somebody who's a much better player than at $6,600 player. This guy's going to be a top 25 player in the world by the end of the year. By the end of this year, I was going to say next year, but I think even by the end of this year, he's an insane putter. He's long off the tee. He can hit it 310, 320 yards. And with the approach play, he's very streaky. There's times where he's controlling his golf ball. I mean, he applies some of the most spin that you'll see for any player on tour. And this isn't some big bulky guy. He's a lefty. He's a real small type of guy. And he does it with precision. He's kind of like a Rory McIlroy in that way, where he's kind of that small, little wiry figure, but generates a ton of club head speed. So I'm really going to be playing him in DFS early and often, particularly if he's in the 6K range, even without tons of data on him. He's just, the eye test at times can fail us. But there's just times where you can watch a player and you just know that he's special. You can just tell, like Alex Smalley, for example. I told you guys before he went out there and he had that 10 under round that he was just an absolute stud. You can tell by watching Alex Smalley. And I'm sure a lot of you got to see him on TV that week. His swing is absolutely beautiful. There's just no other way to describe it. It's the same type of situation with a guy like a Garrett Higo. He has it. You can tell by watching him. It's very, very apparent. And I'm going to be playing him early and often. Matt Wallace, he's kind of like the golf Twitter play of the week. Somebody at $6,500 who, if you're using a model, if you're taking a look at a little bit of the form overseas, skill set fit from a historical fit perspective, you'll see him pop in a few categories across the board. He's somebody who really, the deeper you dive into the numbers, the better play that he looks. He's extremely volatile. When he has his best stuff, he's one of the best ball strikers in the world. Definitely somebody that I'll be playing. Pangazire at $6,500, also extremely volatile, relatively long off the tee. Another guy who's extremely volatile. These three guys, I'm glad that they're priced together. They're all pretty much the same player. High birdie batter percentage, long off the tee, gets really hot with the irons. I'll be playing all three of them. You can see they're all relatively low owned, 1.3%. 0.8, 0.9, and 1% with these three. And even Adam Long, when Adam Long makes cuts, he plays well. So these are the type of guys I'm looking for in this 6K range. When they make cuts, when they actually have their best stuff, they're actually able to finish in the top 15 of a good event. Whereas some of these other guys, like Danny Lee, Henrik Norlander, Joseph Bramlett, Wyndham Clark, Patrick Rogers, that type of thing, they make more cuts. You can see their made cut percentage is a little bit higher than some of these guys, but they don't compete as often, right? They have a lot of 30th, 40th place finishes, which isn't going to do you anything good in a GPP. I'm going to stop for a few questions here. Let's see the sneaky 6K plays. Oh, yeah, we're about to get to the real sneaky ones down here at the bottom. But we went over a few ones here in the middle. Fat Hoffman, yeah, man. He threw out his back, apparently. So it's apparently a back injury. Sam says, got to run, but I'll watch the VOD for the cheap guys. Appreciate the analysis. Appreciate you for coming by, man. And Barry says, sneaky 6K gems, Ryan Moore and Hagee. Stack those studs, fellas. Completely agree with you. Yeah, we're going to talk about Hagee. Where's Ryan Moore priced? We may have already passed him. Maybe not. No, he should be pretty cheap. Yeah, we'll get to Ryan Moore down here. I don't have him excluded from my player pool. He's not a priority, at least for right now. But I could completely understand it. He has some good course history. Kyle Stanley, we talked about him as a core pick earlier in the week. He's won this golf tournament. He has that ball striker build that we're looking for. Also a bad putter, which again, it's not a good thing that they're bad putters. It's just something that we're not holding against them. Adam Shank, a volatile player, can get really hot with the iron play. Good fair price on him at $6,300. I think you could argue that he's a little bit underpriced. JT Poston, I thought was going to be chalk this week. A lot of people have talked him up around the industry, but I still have him at 1.5%, which is more than fair for him. He has elite course history here. He's looked a lot better over his last two events than he did in all of 2021. In fact, towards the end of 2021, I believe he went on a 7 or an 8 cut miss streak. And this is somebody who I have a lot of connections to, so that was unfortunate to see. So yeah, the recent form metrics, I mean, just look horrible. So we don't really want to see that there. But at the same time, if you look at his last 2 events, he shot 69 or better, I believe, in the last 8 rounds, which is something that I don't think many people, if anyone else in the field, can say. So that's something that he has going for himself. He's been consistent too, which for JT Poston isn't really something that we usually attribute to him. He's usually a little bit more of a hit or miss type of player. Harry Higgs has played well at this golf tournament. Also somebody who's not the best course fit. You can see number 126 in the field, but has played well here in the past. So much like a JT Poston, some of these guys just get it done here. And this is one of the stickiest golf courses in terms of course history that we have on tour. Moving now a little bit further, Roy Sabatini, Ryan Moore. They're people I would consider mixing in, particularly Ryan Moore. You can see from a course fit perspective, he's top 50 in the field, which for guys down here in the 6K range, that's excellent. The recent form isn't anything great with Ryan Moore, but we're down in the 6K range. You're going to find things that are wrong with everyone. Austin Eckert, you can see he's not a priority for me, but he's at least in consideration for the player pool. We'll have to see if I need more guys in the pool. Might not need to actually add these guys in. But in terms of the course fit, very similar story to a Ryan Moore. Hank Lebioda, the numbers love him. I don't, from a pure eye test perspective. I don't think that he has the ball striking to take this place apart. So if you want to just purely follow the numbers, go ahead and do so. I understand that. A lot of the times that's exactly what I do. In fact, most of the time I do. But I've rostered enough Hank Lebioda to know better. He always looks good on the numbers. I don't know what it is about his game. If you look at him on a pure model perspective, pretty much any time that you go there, he looks good. I don't know what it is. It's strange. Steven Yeager at $6,200. He's great on these greens, at least from what we've seen here on the West Coast. He was horrible towards the beginning of the fall swing, really wasn't doing anything in terms of finishes. And then all of a sudden, we get over here on the West Coast, he starts putting up finishes. On the Korn Ferry Tour, he was a winner, somebody who was one of the best players in all of the Korn Ferry Tour. I believe he had the points list 2 years ago, ended up winning that. And because they didn't have the promotion that year, he wasn't able to get promoted. He had to wait until the end of this year to get promoted, which is pretty annoying. So he's $6,200. He's been waiting a long time to get out here. I'll have him in a few lineups. Jason Duffner, well documented on the channel that I like him here. Great ball striker. Pretty decent course history here as well for Jason Duffner. And he is not the longest player off the tee, but he sure is accurate. And because it's only 7,300 yards, he'll get away with that. Sam Ryder, somebody I'd consider going to. He's $6,100. The numbers don't love him, but he is a damn good ball striker, particularly with the approach play. Sung Kang, somebody I will consider playing. He's super cheap. He's only $6,000, so he's the pure minimum. He's not a long player off the tee, but he's an extremely volatile, streaky player. A few other guys I'd consider that I don't necessarily have down as yeses. Where's Brendan Hagee at? Brendan Hagee, I'd consider going to at least a little bit more than guys like a Brendan Gay or a Peter Malnati. Longer off the tee. He's also somebody who shoots 7 or 8 under par fairly often. We see him as first-round leader at plenty of golf tournaments over the last year. I believe he was first-round leader at least 2 or 3 times, which is going to be up there with some of the most players in the world. I know Sam Burns did it like 4 times last year, so he's probably number 1. But Brandon Hagee worth a few looks. You can take a look at Jimmy Walker. The ball striking has looked really good over the last few weeks. Roger Sloan, at least in terms of pedigree, is underpriced. James Hahn. Okay, guys. If James Hahn would have won last year, I don't know if you guys remember, he was up 2 strokes with like 4 holes to go. DraftKings Sportsbook had him at 75-1 to win the golf tournament because they had him included with the field number. And I put $1,000 on it. So let's just say I was really mad that he didn't win. And I refuse to play him. But yeah, he has good course history here. Let's just say that. He's got good course history. He cost me like, I don't want to say he cost me, right? Because James Hahn was never winning that golf tournament. But hey, if he would have somehow ended up pulling through with that golf tournament, we would have made like nearly 6 figures. That would have been pretty funny. Not funny, but it would have been pretty sick. Let's move on a little bit further up the board. Austin Eckert, somebody I'd also consider adding to the pool. We talked about Ryan Moore. Sepp Straka, also a streaky iron player. We consider adding him. Hickok, same type of story. A little bit further up the board, I don't hate Rogers or Clark. I just don't like the fact that they're not the top-end players with their volatility. I mean, they make a lot of cuts, but they finish in 30th or 40th a whole lot as well. Up here, Doug Gim, same type of story. He tends to make a lot of cuts. He's a good ball striker, at least. So you can see the model tends to like Doug him here. You see 46 pretty much across the board, 46, 48. You can convince me to play a little bit of him as well. So cool. We went through the player pool. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit of strategy before we get on out of here. I know this has been a little bit longer stream than usual, but we have a huge player pool, tons of really good players. So wanted to make sure we could touch on as many people as possible. Ali Bro says Nick Taylor. Let's go ahead and talk about Nick Taylor. The ball striking at the end of last week looked really good. And the only reason I know that is because I was fading his greens and regulation numbers, and he hit the over both times. He also hit the over on fairways both times last week. And they were set pretty aggressively. The numbers were pretty high. So that means his ball striking was excellent. I haven't taken a look at the approach numbers. Let's take a gander while we're at it. Let's take a look at his shots gained approach. How expensive was he again? 6,800. All right, so we have Nick Taylor here, gaining it everywhere but the putter, right? So we know he's not really a good putter, so we can kind of throw that aside. Doesn't really matter this week. You could play some Nick Taylor. You could convince me, right? He's looked pretty good of late. Historically, though, not the best player. This isn't really the best golf course for him. Certainly not very long off the tee. And he's not like he's known for the approach play, right? So that's why I'm looking for some of these other guys, like a Martin Laird. He's known for his approach play. Same thing with a Ches Reavie, Stuart Sink, even down here with Emiliano Grillo. Those are the guys that I'm prioritizing, right? The guys that are approach play specialists. I don't think it's impossible for him to finish in the top 15 or 20, though, right? So he could go out there, pay off his salary, that type of thing. That's what I've got on Nick Taylor there. Chandler says, do we think anyone going to withdraw before the event, or do we think everyone is set to go? I wish I knew, man. It's one of those things where you got to pay attention to the news. Of course, I try to update it on the video when I can. So that's one of the perks of being in the Discord chat is anytime we get one of these pieces of news, I'm like going in there immediately, letting everyone in the chat know, tagging everyone. But also make sure you're following PGA Tour comms on Twitter. That should definitely be something that you guys have. I would make a Twitter if you guys don't have one, just to go ahead and do that, because they tweet pretty much all the withdrawal news. The only one that they haven't tweeted was with the Charlie Hoffman, which I cannot stand. They knew at least an hour and a half before the round that he withdrew, and they never came out and tweeted it. So I ended up playing him that day in Showdown. It wasn't just my 4-round stuff. I ended up getting screwed that day. I had Charlie Hoffman in over $400 something of Showdown lineups. So that was really fun. And DraftKings' response of tough luck was even better, to be honest with you. Okay. All right. So we got through the player pool. Let's go ahead and talk some strategy now. And I know we did a little bit of this at the beginning, but I want to make sure that we go through a complete breakdown of the strategy. And my strategy this week, this doesn't have to be yours, right? I go ahead and always preface it with that, is going to be to try and take at least 1, 2, maybe even 3 of these studs. Not going to be any lineups where I'm starting in the 9K range. I'm pretty much going to have a 10K guy. I might have a few lineups that start with Xander Schauffele, maybe a few with Jordan Spieth, but certainly nothing below that. I'm going to be taking one of these guys up top for sure, because if one of these guys doesn't end up winning the golf tournament, let's say from Xander Schauffele up, they're going to end up finishing second or third at the very least. So you're going to need one of these guys to be optimal. They're going to probably make a lot more birdies than the rest of the field as well. And I like a lot of the plays, right? So if I had to rank them in order, my favorite play is Victor Hovland. My second favorite play on the slate would be Jon Rahm. That just takes into account the salary difference, of course, also the ownership difference. Jon Rahm, more expensive and higher owned than somebody like a Victor Hovland. After that would be Justin Thomas. Really do like Xander Schauffele. And lastly, it would be Jordan Spieth. Of course, Cantlay and Matsuyama going to be fades for us. Moving down a little bit further, this is a little bit of a den range here, especially with some of the withdrawals that have came out. There were a lot more guys in this range that I wanted to play, but some of them have kind of leaked out of the player pool, right? So we're looking at more exposure to some of these guys up top, trying to, again, maybe even squeeze in 2 of these guys into the same lineup. But I still really do like Sam Burns. He's putted really well on these hybrid golf surfaces over at Innisbrook for the Valspar, that type of stuff. Bubba Watson, I really like him as a low-owned pivot. Again, he's single-digit owned right there. Scotty Scheffler, we're going to have to figure out what to do with him. I have Core right here, but I want to go ahead and put a question mark over there because that ownership number is very concerning. Tony Finau, Louis Oosthuizen, maybe the best plays on the slate in terms of points per dollar. You can see down here, Louis Oosthuizen certainly up there among them. Russell Henley gives him a run for his money, but unfortunately, Russell Henley playing way over his head. So your model is going to tell you to play Russell Henley this week, particularly mine that takes into account recent form quite heavily. But from a game theory perspective, he's a fade for us. And in this range, this is really what I'm going to cover on right here. This is a pretty strong range, right? And this would be for most weeks. If you were playing at Pebble last week, guys like a Seamus Power were nearly $10,000. Corey Connors probably would have been over $10,000. Russell Henley certainly would have, right? So these guys are pretty solid golf players, right? But in this field, they're $8,000 golfers. So you're going to see them coming in with really high ownership numbers when you could spend up $700-800 higher, right? Get to somebody like a Daniel Berger or Bubba Watson, in my opinion, have a much safer, much better play when it comes to their pedigree. So even though they are solid plays, particularly for some of these smaller field events, this is a borderline major championship level field, which means that guys like a Seamus Power are actually overpriced. Guys like Tom Hoagie are certainly overpriced. Even Harold Varner III, Luke List, all these guys that have been playing with really good recent form for this field, they are drastically overpriced. I mean, going to some of these guys with the better pedigree, like a Keith Mitchell, going even a Kevin Kisner, who I know we didn't talk about a little bit earlier. I'd rather be getting to some of these guys, Matt Kuchar, Gary Woodland, than some of these guys at the top of the 7K range. Even if I had the salary, right? If I had the $7,900 to take somebody like, or $7,800 to take somebody like a Harold Varner III, I'd rather spend down and take Gary Woodland. I'd rather leave the $500 on the table, let alone what the extra $500 opens up at the top of the board. So this is going to be a dead range for me. You can see opposed for, aside from 2 to 3 guys in this range, most of them are going to be fades, or at the very least guys that I'm just not prioritizing in my pool. So in general, like I said, 2 studs up top, kind of fading this top of the 7K range. Of course, I love the bottom of the 7K range. We have a bunch of our value plays there, a bunch of other guys that I like mixing in, and then plenty of options in the 6K range because we're going to need them, right? If we're going to take 2 of those studs, a guy in the 8K range is more of a middle tier option. We're going to have to take at least 1 guy down here, if not 2 of them. So that's why we have so many guys down as a yes. Let's see. Let's count. How many of these sub 6K guys are we playing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10. Right around 20. Let's say I have down as a yes. I'm going to have them all right around 6, 7, maybe even 8% owned. So between them, maybe 1.5 of my roster spots are going to be taken up. So that's how we're going to be handling that. I'm not going to have anyone at 10 to 15% down low. Again, even guys like a JT Poston that I expected to be chalky, they're coming in right around 2% ownership. Or even a few of the other guys like a Kyle Stanley that's won this golf tournament before. Guys like Matt Wallace, who's being talked up by the industry, right? 1% owned, right? So we can get them at 7 or 8% of our lineups and get plenty of leverage. So that's how we're going to be handling this slate. I guess we'll talk about a few cash lineups because I know there's a few of you guys out there that play cash. In cash, you just want to play some of these high-owned guys, right? So even though Russell Henley is a fade for us in GPP contests, you can convince me to play him in cash. You can also convince me to play a whole lot of the guys in the bottom of the 8K range. Top of the 8K range, like a Louis Oosthuizen, also a Tony Finau. You could convince me to start lineups with a Xander Schauffele because these guys up top kind of force you into that 6K range. And as much as I like some of their upside, for cash, we're not looking for upside. We're looking for a pure median score. And the bottom of the 7K range is just absolute money. I mean, I love Keegan. I absolutely love Aaron Wise. I think Brandon Grace has a lot of upside, but guys that are just pure floor plays, guys that we know are going to play well, are guys like Amito Pereira. I mean, we can go up a little bit further, go to this whole range here from Gary Woodland down to Cam Davis, where all these ball strikers are guys that I really like. So I'd rather live in that range for cash. So if you want to do a backwards build, that might be something to take a look at. Take 2 or 3 of these guys in the bottom of the 7K range and then see how much salary you have left to spend up elsewhere. Just pick your favorite spend up options. That's how I would go ahead and build most of your cash lineups for this week. Before we go on and get out of here, let's go ahead and touch on the comments and we'll wrap it up. Says that Continental says Bubba could go nuclear or nut up. Wish he was cheaper. Yeah, man, he's super overpriced. So that's why we're getting the ownership that he is. He did come in second to Harold Varner III, so that's something to note over there in Saudi. Yeah, man, I like that about Bubba though. I like the fact that he's so hit or miss, at least for these large field tournaments. I kind of want to know early on whether he's going to be in contention or not. He kind of gives that to us, right? If he's 2 or 3 over through the first 5 or 6 holes, we know he's probably going to be trunk slamming. But if he's 2 or 3 under at that point, you've hit big with Bubba. It's going to be one of those weeks. So I kind of look forward to that every Thursday morning is the tilt of opening up the PGA Tour app and seeing where Bubba's at. And Chandler says, I don't think I think I won any of y'all contests, so you're just on this slide. Okay, so I'm assuming you're saying, you're not in any of our contests. So you have this lineup, which is Rom, Hovland, Mitchell, Perez, Wise, and Stanley. So I really like Rom and Hovland up top. So obviously that kind of handicaps the rest of your lineup, which of course is something I'll be doing with a lot of my GPP lineups. But if you're going to be taking guys in that 7K range, I really do like Mitchell, really do like Wise. Stanley's a good guy in that 6K range. The only guy I don't really like is Perez. But honestly, he's not a horrible play, right? He's coming in with good recent form. So yeah, that's a good GPP lineup, man. I think that you couldn't go wrong with that. I think it's a pretty solid lineup. But good luck with all of your lineups for this week, guys. I'm really working on trying to up the graphics game here, trying to make some of these live streams at least look a little bit more professional than they have in the past. We're going to have graphics up. I'm going to start to have a few guests on and whatnot to talk through the slates. Overall, just a bunch of improvements to come. So look forward to all of that, guys. If you guys are watching this on replay, if you have any questions at all that I didn't cover, do not be shy at all to go ahead and put them down in the chat. We are going to have showdown content this weekend as well. It is going to be sometime after the slate ends. I would imagine right around 7 or 8 p.m. There, we're going to be going over all of our projections, right? Whether it's our ownership, our projections for each player in the field. And because we're not dealing with multiple golf courses, it's not like we have to deal with, oh, this guy's playing the stadium course this day, another course the other day. It's a little bit more straightforward, which means you can really focus on the game theory aspect. So looking forward to that. Looking forward to all of our contests for this weekend. Again, good luck, guys, and let's get this cash.